PJ, who did we just talk to?
Dude, we just talked to a super cool guy. His name is Nick Eames. And I have to admit, after we pressed stop is when we relaxed even more. And we talked a lot about even the games that he's playing right now. Yakuza Like a Dragon is what he's playing right now, which we didn't get to chat about on the stream. He talked about a game, Judgment, that he was playing. And he got us inspired to be playing like Cyberpunk. But outside of that, he's a brilliant writer.
He's a good writer. I mean, we wouldn't know. We haven't read his book, but the way he speaks,
it makes me want to read a book.
His book is absolutely on my list to buy.
Yeah.
His book is called Kings of the Wyld, spelt Zach Wyld style.
Yeah.
Because it's a book about a band of mercenaries, and then there's lots of references to pop culture and stuff. So I'm down. I'm in.
Yeah.
I've already recommended the book to people and I haven't even read it. I'm like, you look like you like this book, so you should do it.
Yeah, I do love that when he had all these ideas in his head of what he wanted to write, he kind of Googled his ideas. It didn't exist, so he made it exist. And I think that's a very underrated thing that writers probably should be challenged to do, right?
Just make stuff that you want to read or write or watch or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So pretty stoked about that. It's also like when we talk to this guy, we've talked to him, we've interacted with him twice now.
Yeah.
He always just points out that we're like the same. Like he likes synthwave, he likes cyberpunk, it's just weird.
He's our people. And anybody who's listening to this, he's your people too. And you're going to learn a tiny bit when listening to this interview about the M-, because that was important to me.
The M-. Cut to Nick Eames.
Enjoy.
Yeah, my whole life is a break at the moment.
Yikes. Let's dive into that.
I can kind of work when I want to. I do have some stuff that I gotta work on over the holidays.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I owe a third book at some point, so I should be working on it every day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
George R. R. Martin style. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
George R. Martin style, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, did I say R. R. Martin? Oh my
double
God.
R. Double R Martin.
Is it R. R. Martin?
That's Tolkien.
Could be the same.
James Tolkien and James Martin.
George.
Both.
It is R. R. Yeah. Yeah.
It is R. R. Martin, right?
It is. Yeah.
Is that like a...
I mean,
seems a little suspicious.
my middle initials are J and G, and I almost went with Nicholas J.G. Eames for my author name. And then last minute, I was like, everyone calls George R. Martin all the time. And I do not want people to call me Nicholas J.G. Eames like nonstop.
Right. It's a lot of syllables.
It does. It also sounds like an insurance company. Yeah. I got that.
And you just say it like you say Stephen J. Donaldson or whatever you're going to say. You always add the middle initial and yeah.
Initials are bad news. It means you're not the original.
Exactly.
You had to throw in the initial like Michael Fox. You need to throw that J in there, right? It's exactly the same.
Is writing like that where you can't have the same name as someone else? Like
you could, but boy, oh boy, if you had the same name as like a bigger author than you'd be screwed.
Right.
Oh.
And I think the same goes for titles. Like you can call your book whatever you want. Like I don't think there is such a thing as a copyright on a title. But like I could call my book The Hunger Games, but no one would ever find your book, because it would just be buried under the actual Hunger Games.
You would just need to pay heavily into SEO just to make sure that all of your content gets pushed higher than.
And in which case you may be able to make more money.
That's where they get you. Yeah. You're just Thomas Clancy, not Tom Clancy, Thomas Clancy.
Yeah.
Tommy
Clancy.
Yeah, Tommy Clancy.
Tommy Clancy.
That's amazing. Hey, we just dove in here. Nick, tell us a bit about yourself in like 100 words or less.
I am an epic fantasy writer who was an aspiring writer for almost my entire life, worked in restaurants, and about 6 or 7 years ago, my dreams came true.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to go over 100 words, so I don't know if I was close.
That was poetic. That was really good.
Yeah.
Your dreams came true.
So when you say you're an aspiring writer, were you like try, like at what point did you consider yourself an aspiring writer? Like, was it when you were like trying to be published, or were you just like, I like writing, so I
would say that when I first decided, okay, I'm going to try to be an author, that's what I would call it. Because I was writing like in high school, and I was, writing some stuff before that, but it was on my 25th birthday that I was like, I'm going to start, and here I go, and I got a laptop. And started writing this magnum opus that will never see the light of day, but I worked on for the next 12 years. And I aspired all that time.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a great question, Danny. When does the aspiring become the completion, I guess? When you're in the learning phases, I guess you're aspiring to be further than the student, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, people do say, it is a pretty common phrase to be like, just call yourself a writer when you're writing, period. Yes. Which is technically true. But say you could be aspiring to be a published author, in which case that's what I was.
I think I've heard the term, like, the moment you get paid for something you do means you're that thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Me just,
makes
putting
sense.
a cloth over top of a fire here does not make me a firefighter. But the moment that there's a paycheck that says Vancouver PD firefighting, then that means I'm a firefighter. I went too far with
You could also get paid in barter, so people could give you a loaf of bread for fighting a fire,
Yes.
A chicken.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Does that kind of resonate? Or is there, like, if somebody else who hadn't had anything published, but they were like just trying to write, but they call themselves a writer, is that kind of insulting in any way?
Oh, I would never, ever be insulted by that. And I would be like, yeah, you are a writer, technically. Like, cool. Great. Good for you.
Right.
Yeah. You can't really,
you gotta say it
me.
like,
yeah.
You gotta be like, good for you. You're a writer.
Yeah. Way to go, buddy.
Yeah.
See you on the bookshelf.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
See you on the bookshelf. Dude, that's a really good line. That's good. I think that applies even to the music industry. Like, we're musicians, but when somebody's just learning how to play drums, especially when I'm dealing with kids, I'm always like, yeah, you're a drummer now. Good job. You're a student of drums. Yeah. You're a drummer. So
yeah. And the same goes for artists. I mean, how many people they do art, but they wouldn't necessarily call themselves an artist.
Right.
And if someone says, oh, what do you do for a living? If you just said artist, you might be, overselling it.
Is there a feeling of like imposter syndrome a tiny bit when you're just in the beginning stages and you're calling yourself something that's an official title,
No, I think imposter syndrome always comes after you've been published. For writers, at least, as far as I know.
Right.
Boy, oh boy, does it ever.
You feel that?
I have. Yeah. I don't really feel it anymore. But I did for a long time. Yeah. Like the first time I went to a con and I signed up, I was so eager. I signed up for all these things. But then when the time came to do it, maybe some people backed out of a panel. And once it was just me and this other woman. And I was like, and there was a large crowd of people. And I'm like, what the fuck am I going to talk about? I have no idea. I've just been doing this. I'm just winging it. This is a nightmare. And thankfully, she was a very, very established writer who'd been to many cons. And she just like put me under her wing and off we went. Yeah. Threw me some softballs. Yeah.
She took it easy on you. She saw you were vulnerable.
Oh, yes. And was I ever. Scared
you dominate?
Book.
Yeah.
No. I think after you've been in the business for a while, it's easier to ramble on about it, I think.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
You got anecdotes. You gotta collect those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you study hard, you end up being able to resonate more with as a mentor, per se, to other people, I guess, right?
Yeah. And you're interacting with other authors as well. So you get to, their tricks. So even if you're not speaking from your own experience, you can more easily relay other people's experience.
Yeah, you got it.
I find. I'm sure it's the same as in the music and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Like shared experiences is a big thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We all kind of suffer the same way in a lot of respects, right?
True.
I always tell like beginning guitar players, like you're gonna learn the F chord and you're gonna look back and you're gonna be like, why the hell was that so hard? What was that? Because everybody kind of has the same kind of thing, so everybody can kind of support each other through that,
Yeah.
I think being accepted into the community in which you are trying to associate with is probably the other aspect of it. Having other authors, rub shoulders. Do people still do that? They rub shoulders.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Or other things.
It validates, It validates kind of the role in which you've taken, right?
Totally, yeah. And I think for some people, it doesn't necessarily go away. Like I'm sure if someone, say, is a blogger or a book reviewer and they get to meet their favorite authors, they may feel, oh my God, what am I doing at this table or talking to these people? But the same goes for, I went to Scotland this summer and met some of my favorite authors and was just absolutely scared shitless. To meet them. And then also somebody came out of a pub and saw me and started to weep. So, there's always levels. There's always a bigger fish out there.
So you're getting recognized? Like people are.
Well, this was at during a big con, during WorldCon in Glasgow, and the guy in question, he just happened to, he was there with a bunch of people that I knew. We were walking up to the bar and he came out and he was just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And he was an Irish guy and he was pretty psyched. It was pretty cool.
Really cool. Yeah. Was that weird to be I guess in that context, it's easier to recognize someone, but was that weird for you to be like, what?
A little bit. To have a reaction that strong. Funnily enough, it actually happened at a dinner party recently too. I was with friends and we were going around, we were just talking around the table about what we do for a living. And I think this one person knew that I was an author, but then at one point, maybe he asked what do you write? And I told him and he was just like, oh my God, you're Nicholas Eames. And tears started to come to his eyes. And he was like, sorry, I'm crying. This is super embarrassing. And it was embarrassing for me as well. I was just like, oh my God, that's ridiculous, way to react to me, who wears jogging pants 24/7,
That's funny. Humanizing people is sometimes a lot harder when, a small example, I was out for dinner with somebody once, a whole table of people, and I was chatting with this guy beside me, and he said he's a bass player, and I was like, oh, I'm a drummer, we play in bands together. And I was just lobbing to him, being on the road, doing tours, and I was just trying to level up with him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, would I know you from any band? And he said the name of his band. I won't say it right now. And it was a very large band that everybody knows. And I was the only person at the table that didn't connect the dots that that's who he was.
Wow.
And then suddenly I was just like, oh, and then I got a little starstruck a bit.
Yeah.
But I'd already been talking to him for an hour and a half, just as a normal guy.
Yeah, totally.
But the tables turned suddenly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there. I do I do know what all my favorite authors look like, so I can spot them coming. Yeah.
So you can play it cool.
Yeah.
Well,
that's actually how I got published, was that I recognized one of my favorite authors in the restaurant I worked at, and he came into it. And
tell us a bit about that story. I remember you telling us at Pentacon about this. This was great.
Yeah, give me the full lowdown. I don't want to assume people know who you are.
True. So
So let's kind of start from the beginning. I'd love to just hear that story again because it's cool. Yeah.
Okay. So he was an author named Sebastien de Castell. He's a Canadian author. At the time, I lived in Vancouver, worked in a restaurant, an amazing restaurant called Fable, in Kitts, and I was up one night. I saw his name on the reservation list, and his name is obviously Sebastien de Castell. There can't be too many of those. I'm like, can you put this guy in my section? And so she put him in my section, and sure enough, I recognized him, and he was there for his wife's birthday. And I went up to him, and I was just like, oh, hey, we got talking, and I was like, oh, I'm an author too. I love your books. And he was super gracious about it. And then I think I was just about 3/4 of the way done the book that got me published. And then a few months later, I saw him at the Vancouver Writers Festival, and he recognized me, and he's like, how's your book coming? I'm like, oh, it's done. There's an agent looking at it. And then he came back into Fable a few months later after this agent and I had worked together pretty closely for 3 months, but then parted ways. And he knew that agent was a pretty big one. And so even though that agent didn't take it, he's like, well, I can maybe pass it on to my agent to see if she likes it, but no promises because she rejects all my friends. And, so she ended up taking me on. And so, yeah.
And that's that's Kings of the Wyld. Is that the book that?
Yes. Yeah.
Was you were 3/4 of the way done?
Yeah. And when I was done too, I forgot to mention, I think I maybe asked him out for coffee or something like that. And he met me at this coffee shop and we just kind of shot the shit about the publishing industry and getting an agent. And he brought me a hardcover copy of his book with the inscription inside said, here's, consider this a down payment for a copy of your first novel. So shortly after my book came out, which was only in paperback, somebody did a hardcover special edition of it. So I put one aside and said, the debt is repaid kind of thing, and got to give it back to him. So,
incredible.
You owe him nothing now. Debt
absolutely
is entirely paid.
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Flat. Yeah. That's all it took. Oh man. What a great story of somebody who saw potential and wanted to absolutely give you every opportunity for success, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of authors can be like that. I mean, all the ones that I've met have been pretty gracious, pretty amazing with their time. I've met some really, really incredible people. And it also just goes to show, I had a girlfriend at the time who was just like, if you ever see someone in public, like if you ever get a chance like this, just always take it, always ask, always, and a lot of people don't, they get too afraid to ask. Obviously probably white dudes do it the most, go ahead and assume they're going to get some help, to be fair. Yeah. So, but it's a lesson to, I think all artists out there is if, take your shot, shoot your shot.
It doesn't feel like it's a competitive market. It's not like there's only one author job. And if you tell anybody about it, they're going to get it.
Totally.
The goal is to all boats. What is it? Raise all water, raises all boats. Oh God, I'm horrible.
Oh, you're pretty close. It's pretty close.
But you know what I mean? Yeah. So you being able to get as many authors
raises all boats, maybe something.
Love it. Yes.
We're close. Yeah.
Close. High tide raises all boats.
Sure.
So you want as many authors you want to raise as many authors as you possibly can, right?
Totally. And I was just saying something today, you go into the bookstore these days and romantasy is all the rage. This kind of amalgamation between fantasy and romance books, and it is everywhere, and they're all the best sellers and they're all on display, but I certainly don't begrudge any of them because it gets so many people into reading, kind of like Harry Potter did back in the day. Of course. It's just, it's a gateway to all reading, and especially fantasy or romance books. So
you just blew my mind. Romantasy?
Have you ever heard this term?
Is that where elves kiss each other?
But yeah, they do. They do a lot more than kiss, my friend.
Love it.
Yeah. They F the S out of each other.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's pretty, from what I understand, I haven't read much of it, slash any of it, but it gets pretty spicy.
He says when he winks. Yes.
It's pretty spicy. But have you heard of Sarah J. Maas, the Throne of Glass series, Court of Thorns and Roses?
Yep.
There's a whole genre of books that are basically a blank of blank and blank. But yeah, now it's just absolutely huge. And going into Indigo the other day, they're everywhere. And it's just nice to see because it gets young people reading. Yeah.
Anything can bang anything, my understanding is.
Oh, yeah. Anything can bang anything. There was a book going around at Scotland World Con, and I saw it again at Pentacon called, what was it called? The Milking something. And it's like a Minotaur sex book.
Okay.
Yeah. It gets around this book.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They have 6 arms, essentially.
Some of them.
Yeah.
And 2 horns.
And 2 horns.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. They can hold each other. Anything can hold each other. Oh my God. Romantasy is very interesting to me. Very good title. Yeah.
You're in the fantasy realm. Where do you cross over into romantasy? How do you, because obviously a lot of books would need to have some sort of romantic element or something like that, a story.
Yeah, I think having romance is a key element, and relationships is a key element, and probably often sex is a key element. Yeah, I think they're definitely for older teens, these books.
The older teens.
And up. And everyone else.
Up.
Yeah.
Not down. Up.
Yeah.
Huh. Romantasy.
So you were you toiled at your first book for 12 years. Yeah. What got you on the path to the book that got you published?
Well, I had gotten rejected for it many times, and then I read the book Ready Player One, which got made into a movie. You may or may not have seen it. Directed by Steven Spielberg. And that book, when I read it, it kind of blew my mind. It was one of the very few books in life that I could not put down. I wanted to do nothing else but read. And when video games exist, that's a pretty tough call to make. So I just loved it. And it's a book about, for anyone who is not familiar with it, just kind of like a lot of 80s pop culture, whether it's music, movies, video games. And I was around in the 80s, but I was very young. And so it was a little bit before my time, a lot of the music, but just like barely before my time. And it was such a book written by the things that person loves so much and trying to pass that love on to the reader. And so it was a combination of that and also Rush, because in the book, Rush plays a pretty big role in it. And he has to play this Rush song from 2112. And I kind of listened to that and started to listen to like a lot more Rush and music kind of like that. And so much of it has a lot of fantasy elements, especially Rush. You know, you go on these crazy journeys, whether they're in space or whether they're in like, you know, fantastic settings. Same with Led Zeppelin, same with Pink Floyd. And so that somehow in there, the idea of like, oh, what if mercenary bands were like rock bands came to me. And I thought, oh man, I would love to read that book. I'm going to Google it. And I Googled it and was like, no one's written this book. And I was like, what the hell? Maybe I should. So I sat down and wrote the first 3 chapters and then went back and worked on that giant unpublishable monster for another year. And then while I sent that out to get rejected again, I went back to the book. It was just called The Band at the time, which is now what the series is called. And yeah, just started working on it. And it was, for a long time, fantasy because of George R.R. Martin. And a lot of other very successful authors in the early like 2000s, fantasy was like not very fantasy. And the fantasy that I loved was not very fantasy. It was all just like politics and intrigue and murder and like war, religion, culture. If you had told me when I was like 34, 33 years old that I would write a book with a goblin in it, I would be like, no fucking way. I wouldn't even read a book with a goblin in it. I'm a grown ass man. I read grown-ass man fantasy books.
Only if they kiss each other.
Because, I mean, in George R.R. Martin, the dragons play a bigger role in the show than they do in the books, but they're almost never in the books. All those books are just like people. There's no fantasy creatures. Even the White Walkers are just like a distant thing. And the same goes for a lot of very popular books in the late 2000s. It was just people. And so I was writing a book that was just people, just war, just culture, just very serious. And then I was just like, F it. I'm going to write a book that is everything that kind of got me into fantasy, every single fantasy creature I could possibly imagine, jokes everywhere, whether they land or not, and just go with it. And ultimately, I was about halfway through it, and I was like, okay, I think I've got something special here. And when you tell people the premise that it's like mercenary bands or like rock bands, and the basic gist of it, they kind of, their eyes light up a lot of the time, as opposed to when you're talking about your epic fantasy where the king of this place married the queen of this place, and someone was murdered, and they just kind of glaze over. So
right, yeah. I think you like. You have a really good 1-sentence pitch for the book. Like, I think that really resonates with me. Like, I immediately understand what your book is about by just the first few words you say. Right.
Yeah. And you could even boil it down to just rock and roll fantasy, you know, which there is nothing to my very great luck. There is nothing like it out there at the moment.
Has anybody like come onto your trail now that they've seen success from your book? Like,
yeah, a little bit. There's been some books that have been very, very similar, and even some of the publishers have mentioned to me, "Oh, if I can't publish you, I'll publish something similar." And so there's been a lot
like a threat?
More.
Yeah, that's
no. Just
need somebody taken out.
I take it as a great compliment, but there's a lot more like ragtag groups of people books now than there was before mine. And granted, mine's not the sole one responsible for that, but as far as ragtag groups of people books that are kind of like humorous as well, it's definitely one of the bigger ones, I would say.
There's probably groups of themes that happen from era to era in 5 or 6 year time frames where there's a whole bunch of books that come out in that style, right?
Totally, like a heist books. You know, like there was a pretty big heist book, and there's a bunch of smaller heist books, and I'm sure there's books like survival type books, like Hunger Games, and
totally.
So yeah,
you certainly see it a lot. Goonie style stuff is big in the news, big in the film industry right now, in particular, right?
Oh, I guess.
Yeah, Speaking of, I've been watching that Skeleton Crew
That's
show.
where I'm going with that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah,
You guys are liking it so far?
I do. Yeah. What do you think?
Taping this, we're what, 4 episodes in?
4.
Yeah.
I think we're on episode 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it a lot, but to hearken to what you're saying right now, it definitely has typical tropes that you can say are from previous movies or themes and that's why like familiarity is why it's going to be good. Right. And so do you find that within your writing, you definitely want to jump towards a lot of familiarity for people? Kind of like Ready Player One did? Like
for me, for sure. Right? Yeah. And like I say, I stole from everybody to make my book. And there's not too many original ideas in there. My bad guys have bunny ears, which is taken from Final Fantasy. There's airships, which are also taken from Final Fantasy. A lot of video game references. There's a lot of like movie and music references in there. The thing with my book is that I wanted to put a ton of references in there, whether it's a chapter title, a town name, a character's name, a weapon. All the weapons kind of are named after bands or songs, but always subtle enough so that if you didn't get them, you would never know that you were missing it. So my editor was, I think, a 25-year-old woman at the time, didn't get any of the references, didn't care, loved it as a great fantasy story. Whereas the agent that originally was going to take me on and then said no, he was a 50-year-old British guy who got all the references, and for him and for some readers as well, it's too much. They're just like, this takes me out of the story too much. But most people I find do like it. And even with things like video game references, like I have a reference in there, a line that goes, "The cake is a lie," which to me was a Dragon Age reference, but I didn't realize it's from the game Portal. But Dragon Age is copying it from Portal. And, to me, someone might read that and go, I'm broken out of this. My immersion's snapped now. I don't like this author. F you. But for me, I was like, I want the reader to go, oh, this writer likes the same things I do. I like him more.
Totally.
I'm enjoying this book more. And to me, that payoff is worth it. And it's worth a shot to write a book like that.
Enough that when you meet somebody in person, they're like, "Wink, I saw that drop you put in there. Cool. I love that game." Or I love that.
And some of the references are very, very, very deep cuts. Like maybe 2 people have gotten there's a Say Anything reference in the second book that almost nobody gets, but it's hard to get.
Don't tell anybody now.
I'll give it away now.
This is totally Ready Player One. If somebody gets it, do they get a prize? They should
alas, no.
It sends them to a website where they get a free copy of something.
I mean, there's also a Dumb and Dumber reference that if someone doesn't get it, I just feel bad for them. They've lived a sheltered and awful life. Yeah.
We landed on the moon.
Though the second pair of gloves lined. I think maybe somebody takes off a cloak and has a cloak underneath it, and the other person's been freezing forever. And he's like, "Here, have my second cloak." And he's like, "What? Yeah. Yeah.
Classic.
Or there's at one point they're doling out like a beef stew to all these prisoners, and one of the prisoners is a minotaur, and he's like, "I'm not going to eat beef stew, man. Do you have any like a salad?" And the guy's like, "No, I don't have any fucking salad." And he's like, "Be a lot cooler if you did."
Nice. Good reference.
Yeah.
Be a lot cooler if you did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're in there, but if you miss them, you miss them. But I mean, speaking of that first agent that didn't take me on, that got all the references, my main character's nickname, his name's Clay Cooper, but his nickname is Slowhand, which is an Eric Clapton reference. There's another character named Moog, who is a reference to the keyboard brand, which is, I think, called Moog, maybe. But but I didn't know that, so I just called him Moog. And this guy was like, "You can't use these words. You can't use Slowhand. Everyone knows Slowhand reference." And I'm like, "Buddy, I assure you, in the realm of North America, under the age of 40, 0 people know the Slowhand reference." And he's like, "That's not true. That's impossible." And so he made me choose between, I'm like, "Can I take one or the other?" He's like, "Sure." So he let me keep Moog, and he made me get rid of Slowhand. But when I got my real agent, she let me put it all back in. So thank God, because
better.
Yeah, because like it turns out nobody knows Slowhand except for music aficionados.
I've never understood his nickname being Slowhand. Like, is it just like he's so chill?
It's romantic, I think it has to do with.
Could be.
You got a slow hand, if you know what I mean.
I made it so the character in my book is always gets punched first. He always gets hit first. before he reacts to it. So they call him slow hand.
Right.
meaning. I'm totally Googling this. There are multiple matches,
like,
slow hand meaning, including nickname for Eric Clapton. Here we go. The nickname slow hand refers to the British custom of a slow hand clap that audiences would perform while Eric Clapton replaced a broken guitar string during a concert. So not as exciting as we thought. Sorry,
That's
guys.
pretty cool, though.
Yeah, not even the realm of
It's
what
a
I thought
slow
that came from. But
hand clap.
Yeah,
he
wouldn't have
changed the
guessed
guitar
that.
string. Yeah.
You should have left it as a sex thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
It's a sex thing because he's got slow hands.
It's interesting that that person had such a reaction to that, because like context matters, right? So if you explain in the book like why he got that nickname, then it all of a sudden has nothing to do with Eric Clapton to a certain extent, I suppose.
Yeah.
Great point.
And ultimately, I try, like most of my things, have some sort of meaning behind them that I've obviously just come up with on the spot.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're in writing mode and you get influenced by something, do you go back and maybe change something, or are you like adding a character to do with that reference, or what's your process?
Yeah. I mean, I have a huge, few pages at the bottom of my Word document with like song titles that would make good names, ones that would make good weapon names, ones that would make good town names. And just lyrics that I might like you obviously you can't like put a lyric in your book, but you can put something similar to a lyric.
Right.
Or just kind of themes, especially when I was first doing Kings of the Wyld, because I didn't know that much about those bands of the 70s, which the first book is based off of. And so just the crazy stories of like, say, John Bonham riding his motorcycle through a hotel. And I would put that stuff at the bottom and be like, try to include this somewhere.
Okay.
And so, a lot of it made it in.
A bit of a checklist as you're inspired. You want to be able to pepper, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. Yeah. And those old Led Zeppelin stories are,
so there's some wild ones.
Fodder for inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's even some lyrics in there. Most notably, like in the second book, right near the climax, where there was the song that I was listening to while I was writing it, which for that one was Meatloaf's For Crying Out Loud.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I literally used the line, her heart was crying out loud. And my editor was like, do you want to rephrase this something else? I'm like, no, nope. It's got to be that. It has to be. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but I mean, that's a reference that no one would ever get, and it's only for me, but still, it's worth it.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually that you touched on something that I'm interested in. So do you listen to music while you write? Like,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, I find like if I'm trying to like script out something that I'm doing, music almost gets in the way of my thought process. It distracts because I'm tuned to pay attention to those things. So I'm curious about your process there. Like,
so do you write in complete silence then? Or do you just
I have like a couple of ambient music, playlists that I listen to, and it actually like unlocks creativity, because it's just like, it's even, I guess.
That's why what I feel about Lo-Fi Girl or any lo-fi music in particular is it just in the background, and it does allow me to focus, because anything with lyrics, my brain is off. So
ultimately I am the same. So when it was the first book, it was a lot easier, and I did listen to 70s rock because a lot of it didn't have a lot of lyrics or spaces it out. Like you could put on a Led Zeppelin album and hear,
true.
100 words, maybe the entire album, if that. 17 minutes you can go without hearing a lyric. Same with the Led Zeppelin, especially the live ones. It's just going. And it's not
but then you're picking up your pencil and air drumming. Come on, dude.
Yeah, true. I mean, I am a slow writer, so yeah. But then with the second book, it was very different. And so in the first book, I have on my website, I have a chapter by chapter breakdown of what songs influence what chapter. And I've got one for almost every single chapter, and almost everyone was unbelievably pivotal in writing that chapter. There was one chapter I was trying to write, and it's got a dragon in it. And I was like stumped. And I started with the dragon was talking, and I'm like, is the dragon going to talk? And I just didn't know how this scene was going to work. And so I was walking to work, and I put on ZZ Top's LaGrange,
Yeah.
And the whole scene came to me when I got home. I wrote the scene, and I just put it on repeat, and you could read that scene and listen to Lagrange, and all the beats of like the climaxes would match the same chapter where the crazy stuff happens, everything about it. And the same goes for in the final battle is I listened to Freebird every day on the way to work, imagining that final battle for a year and a half before I wrote it. And when it came time, I just put on Freebird and off we went. And so with the second book though, 80s music is not, it's like, it got down to the 4 minutes. It's like, oh my God, listen to me. Oh my God, my heart's so broken. Oh my God, I want you back. You can't like listen to it at the same time. So I could listen to it while walking to work, and like get ideas from it. But when it came time to write, I ended up going to, synthwave, which is because the second book is 80s inspired. So synthwave has got the 80s vibe. It's chill sometimes. It's exciting sometimes. It's got everything you need. And then, like you said, with the third book is moving on to the 90s. So it's a lot of grunge and a lot of Rage Against the Machine, a lot of anti-establishment stuff, but a ton of hip hop. And so, and like a bit deeper cut hip hop than say like, I mean, like not Montel Jordan per se, more like Biggie and Nas and stuff like that.
I was raised off Snoop, bro. The Doggy Style album is my Take to the Island album.
Yeah. And so that also isn't great to listen to while writing, but lo-fi is, so much of it has those rap beats in it. Right. So you can put that on. There is some phenomenal Wu-Tang instrumental soundtracks like on Spotify that just off you, like you're good to go.
Oh man.
Cool. Awesome.
But it puts you in a vibe. You're kind of hitting it right. Whenever I'm heading out to play with a blues band for a night, I just put on some random blues just to get into the mood of that style.
Yeah.
Or country band or whatever band I happen to be sitting in with. I just want to get into the vibe of that style. So that's kind of what I'm getting from you. Because I was going to ask you about your Spotify playlist, and because it's all on there.
What's your rap like?
Yeah, there's a Kings of the Wyld
rap. His King.
I mean, other people have
got them all. Yeah,
other people have made some Kings of the Wyld playlists, and they're pretty good. Yeah. But mine is curated by the Book of Eames, if someone's looking for it. And so the Kings of the Wyld one is chapter by chapter. On my website, like I said, it's got the breakdown. With Bloody Rose, I don't think I put a breakdown, because just obviously with Bloody Rose, I wasn't listening to it as I was writing, but it is still in like a vaguely chronological order. Like there's a Journey song near the beginning, and my character literally takes a midnight train at one point, like right in the second chapter. So the songs are all chronological basically. Yeah. And then the third one, when I get it boiled down, will be, it's going to be great.
So the question is, will you ever put it on iTunes so that everybody else in the world can listen to it? It's fine.
I mean, I think Spotify is just going to roll over everyone from then on. These Spotify raps, like you said, they're getting everyone jealous.
Yeah.
So
I didn't like the UI of Apple Music. It was confusing to me. I'm used to the busy Spotify interface.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty anti-Apple in general. I've never used an Apple phone. I despise their quote unquote computers, and, but Apple TV is awesome, admittedly.
Oh, you pick your battle there. You didn't just. That's
fair.
I mean, I didn't want to like it, but come on now. They got some bangers on there.
You have your toe in the water. Let's go.
So
you're not a typical creative who needs to have the MacBook in the Starbucks.
No, I'm a gamer, and so if your computer doesn't have a graphics card or the ability to install a new graphics card, then it's a toy. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what's your writing medium then? Like what do you work with?
A MacBook, just kidding.
MacBook and Apple Notes.
No, yeah. Full scat paper, my friends.
Are you? You're writing lines, son?
No, I use a like a laptop, like a small laptop. And then when I edit, which has been a while since I've edited, but I do that on my PC just because it's my monitor is much bigger, and so you've got your editor's notes there, and it's just like a different experience. So,
and for like someone who's like wanting to get out and start writing, are you like Word is fine, right? There's no advantage to using another program, I imagine. I totally.
Yeah, I mean, Word is the standard for sure. A lot of people use a thing called Scrivener. Maybe not a lot, but some people use. There's an app called Scrivener, which I think costs money and is for people that are like. Often writers describe themselves as plotters or pantsers. So whether you make stuff up beforehand and do it in a big outline, or if you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and wing it. Right. So if you're a plotter, apparently Scrivener's really good because it allows you to make like notes and hyperlinks. You can click on a name and see like write lore in a separate document that it links.
Right. Okay.
But it is complicated to learn. Like to learn it would take you probably a week of like dedication.
You don't got time for that. No way.
And I'm sure some people use Google Docs. I know a lot of writers write on those little hand things, like where they can only see the sentence they're working on, and they do it on the bus.
Monster.
So different strokes for different folks. But ultimately, when it comes to editing, your editor's probably going to use Microsoft Word. Yeah.
Right.
I was going to allude to, is there better software? I just remember my wife used a certain software she writes that is more dedicated towards world building in particular. And you do a lot of world building, but writing in Word, does that limit you a tiny bit in regards to like a lot of forethought?
Oh, it probably does. But at least with my books right now, the world building I do is I'm just winging it as well. Like it's pretty basic, especially when I did my first draft, I was just not world building at all because I'd spent 12 years world building and it didn't like serve me very well. So I was just all about the plot, all about the characters. I'll add stuff in later. I love a good fantasy map, as many nerds do. And I didn't want to do a map. I was pretty reluctant. I was like, please don't make me, because I don't want people to call me on, I say this forest is 1,000 miles wide and I don't want to have to draw it and make it all the things make sense.
Right.
Yeah. Because my characters are jumping in airships, flying from here. It takes them 2 days and then they go in the forest and they're walking for a week. But they made me do a map and ultimately it worked out really, really well. And I now have it framed on my living room wall.
Oh man.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's super funny or ironic, but I saw yesterday a meme about how to build a map. Like in this case, if you're building a world map, all you have to do is just take a photo of some melted snow in a parking lot, and that with all the heights and kind of everything, and there you go. Yeah. There's your world. You
Absolutely.
Just use that instead.
Yeah.
So easy.
And somebody just made that a topographical, like that's your map for their world.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I used to draw lots of map as like a Dungeons and Dragons player. And just like a world builder in general, used to always like just draw random maps and you're just winging it. Oh, here's a gulf. Here's a fjord. Here's a river.
There's probably standards that you have to have within your world.
Yeah. I was thinking like, I guess that's the downside of success is that once you have fans that are deep diving, you need to kind of like satiate them.
Sometimes, yeah. Speaking of, I got an email today. I haven't answered it yet, but I have these rabbit-eared bad guys of mine. Some of them are good guys, but they have a power called the prescience where they can see just a couple instants into the future.
Oh, that's my favorite.
When it comes to like someone's intent towards them necessarily or towards people around them. And so, when you're fighting one, it's hard to get the jump on them because they always know what you're about to do. Just like not very far, but yeah, someone today emailed me and asked me how long that time is. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm going to feel like sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. Cause I do have somebody once like, see something that's going to happen probably 4 seconds in advance and do it, so
I feel like
that's all I want. That's the superpower I've always wanted, is just to be able to see in the future, like 5 seconds, 30 seconds tops. That's all I need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Nicholas Cage does that in that movie. Oh my god!
Oh, that movie's
Next,
so bad. Is that the one where it ends and they're like, "All right, let's do it again"?
Yeah, that's where Jessica Biel was robbed of an Oscar for pretending to be in love with Nicholas Cage. I mean, that's the greatest acting I've ever seen.
It was so brutal.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I can't remember. It was a George Lucas interview, but he was being interviewed and asked one of those very specific questions. And he just was like, yeah, sure. It's that. Totally. And I can't remember what it was. And it was like a funny, like, oh, right. You're the guy. You can just choose what is and what isn't canon. And he just ruined like years of lore building from the fan base. Cause he's like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
So Nick, maybe that's your reply. Just, yeah, well, what do you think, sir?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Now you're going to have to put that in the next book, though. Ugh.
It happens too. I got a lot of people email me and ask if this certain thing is a music reference. And sometimes usually I'm like, yeah, it is. Sometimes I'm like, it probably is, but I can't remember just because I was put so many in and didn't keep track of them. And sometimes I'm like straight up, no, I had no idea that was, the name of Jimi Hendrix's dog or something,
nice.
Yeah.
What I'm learning from this is essentially you're reachable by email for any part of any question of any of your books.
Am I ever? Yeah.
You don't have a street team taking care of all these answers for you?
I sure don't. And I do get way behind on email, but I do answer every one of them. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
He's a man of the people. I love that.
It's great.
Oh my God.
Well, I wrote my fair share of emails to authors when I was an aspiring writer. So
I suppose that's
got to pay it forward. Yeah.
That's the theme of this whole talk is, just get out there and ask people for stuff. Be nice.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm trying to remind myself where we left off in regards to your process of you had the first, right before you got published in particular. What was the process to actually get the book published?
Well, it went to, that agent took me on. It was 120,000 words at the time when I finished it, compared to the first book I wrote was 350,000 when I first finished it.
Wow.
Big monster. And everyone said it was too big. And fantasy books, especially at the time, and even these days, they want them smaller. They want them around 90,000 words, maybe 100,000, max 120 for like a debut author. Because there are things you don't really think about, which is like the cost of printing the book, the paper. So the bigger the book, the more paper it costs, the bigger the risk to the publisher. Same as they can fit less in a box. If the book is bigger, it's a bigger cost to the publisher. Right. And you just don't think about it, but they just want smaller books from debut authors. And then once you're established, you can write as big a book as you want, and so
goblet of fire that shit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I ended up, my editor asked me to cut it down from 120,000 words to 100,000 words. I did that. And then we started sending it out. And about 6 months later, we got 2 offers. And one of them wanted all the humor gone, the most humorous character gone, the title changed, the music references gone, but the story generally the same. Wow. And wanted it called, The War Band, as opposed to the band. And the other people were like, we want it just as it is. We are going to change the title, but we want you to add 50,000 words. And we're going to give you more money for it. So thank God both those offers came in at once, because as someone who had been an aspiring writer for 13 years, I would have taken the other offer. If it was the only offer, Right. And I think my book would have just sank into the morass of similar books. So I got very, very fortunate. Yeah.
I remember you telling that story, and it really resonated with me that, that's a commonality within the industry, whether it's the music industry or the creative industry, is to cut a lot of corners or just do what you need to do to get the fame, I guess. Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's pretty grateful that you had that opportunity. Both opportunities showed itself, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I did add 50,000 words, which basically was all the world building that I didn't do the first time around. And then it came out and nobody, definitely not me, thought that it was going to do as well as it did. I thought it was going to do well before I got a publishing deal. And then once I did, I started looking at other publishing deals, looking at how other authors had done, and realizing, oh my God, not every published author gets to stay published. I read a book at the time while I was doing my editing, and I loved it. And I was like, when's the sequel coming out? And the author was like, there is no sequel. They wouldn't, it only sold 600 copies. And this is a book that I bought off the bookshelf at Chapters. And I'm like, how does it sell 600 copies? You only hear about books selling millions of copies. But this was a published book with a phenomenal cover, a great cover artist, all the big publisher, and it had sold 500 copies. And I just couldn't believe it. So then I was like, oh my God, I could just sink here. So luckily the book was, it was different enough from what was out there. And I definitely did my part, joining fantasy forums on Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff and trying to get the word out there. Obviously said yes to every blog I could. Got very lucky with a lot of bloggers and book reviewers that pumped its tires and got word out there about it. So, yeah, I was just fortunate.
Yeah, wow. It could have gone the other way. Could have took all the humor out of it's just so wild to me. Like, you don't want you to take all the special stuff out, please. Like, humor. No.
Yeah. But at the same time, it also wasn't when in publishing, and I don't know how it works in music, but like you get paid twice a year. And I have
you get paid?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I should say if you're lucky enough for your book to earn out, if you're lucky enough for your book to earn out and get royalties, you get those royalties twice a year, and you have no clue what they're going to be. Like no clue. I always start to get a bit more like frugal. Yeah.
So you don't see like a sales ticker. Like, wow.
No, you can, like, you used to be able to track it on a website, and I used to track it on a website, but it wasn't very accurate at all.
Right.
There is like a Goodreads algorithm that someone made up, but it isn't as relevant anymore. That if you look on the website Goodreads, which like a lot of readers use, and times the ratings by 8, that's kind of, it was like bang on for a while from like 2015 to 2020. It worked flawlessly. And then since then, the proliferation, like, because now more people read ebooks than paper books. They read more audiobooks than any books. And so the thing's skewed a bit more or skewed differently, but it's still pretty close. You can always look at a book's ratings, times it by 8, and that's like in general, but it's obviously there's exceptions.
Wow. Cool.
So at least you know every payout, an idea of what your payout's going to be by the end. Or by
but you know it's probably going to go down unless it sells in another country or something like that, and that kind of might bump it up, but it kind of slowly goes down every year. So I got an email the other day from someone who was just like they're so sick of their job, and they were like, I need some hope. Like, you know, do you think I can be a writer? And my advice to them was like, I'm like, yeah, you totally can, but just to be aware, like, my book was pretty successful, and I worked in restaurants writing it, and I worked in restaurants when it came out, and I worked in restaurants writing my second book, and I worked in restaurants when my second book came out. It wasn't until about 6 months or a year after that they had done well enough that I was able to quit. But like, it is writing, unless you like really, really, really make it big right off the bat, it's not like your life doesn't change overnight, like remotely close.
It's kind of interesting.
Hustle during the hustle.
Yeah. There used to be like a gateway for like musicians. There used to be like a gateway. You know, not everybody has a recording studio. They can't record, but I guess that gateway hasn't been a thing for a very long time for writing. Like anybody can write a book, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a long time, the editor, the agents were a gateway, because getting an agent is the hardest part for sure. Once you've got an agent, it's like 50-50, maybe a little bit more, but about 50-50. Whereas getting an agent is just so hard, because they get, 10 a day at the very, very least, if not way more submissions. And they only take maybe, I don't know, 5 books a year, something like that. The big publishers are only publishing about maybe, I don't know how many, but 20, major fantasy titles over the course of the year. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that, but not much more than that ultimately. And so, yeah, there is a gateway, but nowadays with self-publishing and how successful a lot of self-published authors are, and how polished those books can be as long as the person follows the right channels, can be absolutely huge. And so it gets rid of that gateway for a lot of really talented authors who don't like fit exactly what the agent is looking for at the time, or what they think they want at the time. And granted, AI is a threat to that, because now these publishing companies are putting out AI books, self-published.
Are they really?
AI covers, AI books. This publishing company, I forget what they're called, but they wanted to disrupt the market or the industry, and their plan is to publish something like 5,000 books. AI books, or like AI edited books. Sorry.
That's right.
In the course of a year.
Wow.
I just read about that recently. That's exactly it. Essentially, you could put in whatever variables you want. Like any idiot like me can actually just go on, put in some variables. It'll pump out a book, and then I can have it pressed, and I can have it distributed through Amazon. The end. Cool. Yeah.
And it's shitty for a lot of self-published authors, because especially they've been having a heyday, because they can make absolute buckets of money. And so hopefully it doesn't derail them too much. And AI books, either maybe whether it's regulations or just people reject them. But I wouldn't count on the second one. Because
I think about record labels in particular in regards to music. At least A&R reps were, going out scouting talent, signing that talent, the contract, recording contract, promotions, marketing, tour support, merch. Like there was a whole business plan in place, and then fame occurred, to elevate what little you knew. But now as a musician, you can self-produce, you can self-record, you can self-put it on iTunes, you can pay for your own marketing. You have to do everything on your own. Having a record label is actually, dare I say, not as valuable as it was before outside of tour support. Yeah. So, and it's almost in your best interest to try to get less people taking your money from you. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does that resonate? Yeah.
Oh, it's the same for publishing. Ultimately, I think a lot of authors, once they are published, they like to stay in the traditional route just because it's easy, because other people do a lot of the work for you. But at the same time, some of my really good friends are self-published authors, and these guys live in mansions because they're not giving their money to anyone, and they're just good marketers, and they're not splitting it with an agent. They're not splitting it with a publisher. I can't even imagine. Like, I probably make 10% of what my publisher makes off my books. And so these people are probably making at least 70%, 80% of their own stuff. And
that's so much more of a hustle, though. I feel like the traditional nature, like my age, or, no offense to everybody who's on this call right now, but we're a little bit older. And I feel like there's a traditional place that you want to go down, that you feel like you're playing the game right. I do feel like if I'm working with an artist, I'm like, okay, what record labels are we going to call? And then I got to kind of give my head a shake. And I'm like, oh, maybe not. Okay, you're right. Yeah. I still have a hard time taking an Uber. I'm like, I got to call a taxi. I have to call a cab, apparently. But no, Uber is a more modern way of doing it.
Yeah.
Do you still feel like you have to go down the roads that were traveled by your predecessors?
I mean, I feel like that's an archaic way of doing it. Probably in music as well. Definitely in writing books. But I mean, that said, like my editors have made my books so much better. Like, it is crazy. Same goes for the cover artists. But a really good self-published author will also hire an editor as well. They may not be like a developmental editor that it's going to necessarily work with all the ideas and invest that much into the book with you. But they're going to edit it at least. And then whenever I'm giving advice to self-published authors, it's like you have to obviously hire a cover artist. You got to. Don't let your sister do it. Don't let anyone do it. Do it that. And then you have to hire someone to do the title font. And that is not going to be your cover artist. And if your cover artist says, I'll handle both, say, no, you won't. I'm getting a professional. Because it is night and day, the books that have an actual type, I think it's called a typesetter, who does the font, different than the art. It's not the same person. And some people who had never thought about it go, oh, wow, that's crazy. And they look into it, and their book looks so much better when it comes out. Because
cool.
Yeah. You can just tell.
Because you judge a book by its cover.
Oh boy, do I ever. Don't we all? Yeah.
100% we do.
Yeah.
I always judge by the like turtleneck picture of the author in the back.
Too. Yeah.
How's your one shot look, Nick?
Oh, it's a masterpiece. My blue eyes are just lit right up. I don't know. I'm going to do a big close call this week, but I'll probably keep the blue shirt that I wore in that author photo forever, just for old time's sake.
Right. Yeah.
I was reminded of it.
Wrestle it on
right here.
10 years. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good portrait.
Yeah.
I guess if you don't have you have a friend. Well, you went right where I was going to go, is that you have your team of people that, you have close to you in the music industry to be your producer, engineer, agent, and everybody. And so you got a good team of people that you built over these years.
Yeah. Orbit is pretty good at it. I think a lot of authors don't realize that they are on the hook for a lot of the marketing as well. They want you to be active on social media, but you don't necessarily have to be. And, at the same time, what advance you get for your book very often dictates how much they're going to push it. and how much money they're going to invest. If you get, six figures, they're going to try to make sure they make their money back. If you get something smaller, they're going to put it out and hope it and see how it does.
Interesting.
They're always going to like do their, they've got their channels, they've got their people that they're going to set you up with some interviews and stuff like that. And they are like passionate people and they know exactly like what to do, but just sometimes you can't help a book. That's just destined to fail sometimes, unfortunately. Right. But at the same time, I mean, there's this podcast I listen to called the Publishing Rodeo Podcast, which is these two authors that they both had same publisher. They both had phenomenal agents, both had phenomenal editors, and one kind of did great, and one of them, their books kind of sunk and didn't do that great. And they kind of investigate that, and they have authors on all the time to like talk about the kind of harsh realities of being a published author. And it's a phenomenal podcast.
Okay.
But like the third episode is about book boxes. And if you can say your book, it's called like book crates, that they have a subscription service and they just put your book out to everyone who subscribes to them. And so some of these books, this woman is like, I knew my book was going to be a New York Times bestseller before it even came out because we sold it to this crate that automatically ships 35,000 copies to all its subscribers. And if you sell 20,000 copies in a week, you're on New York Times bestseller for sure. Really? And so like, you just kind of know that. And I never even would have thought. And so they're like, you got to write a crateable book. If it's crateable, it can go in a crate, but yeah, there's a lot of small things that people kind of don't realize that can make a book just take off.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't want to, how do I say this, show behind the curtain, but I did hear that when you publish a book, you should just buy 1,000 copies, and that way automatically gets to
it would probably help
a certain threshold. Even if you bought it, are you putting money into this entire investment, or are you just handing it over to the publisher and go, okay, on you, send me a check when it's ready to go. I'll still be working at Starbucks. Yeah.
I mean, I think it has to sell way more than 1,000 to get on like a bestseller list, probably. But yeah, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure it happens, but yeah, but in the traditional publishing space, you are just, you're sending it out. You get your money in small increments and you just kind of hope it does well.
Cool.
6 cents from SoCan. That's what we get.
Yeah.
Because it got licensed once for
the
a
editing
commercial.
thing. The editing thing is interesting to me. Like, is it like you have two types of editors? You have like a grammar editor, and then you have like a like I really love hearing about like movies being made and they were saved in the edit. Like the editor actually like moved everything around to be like, okay, this like made the movie. Is like, do you have editors that are that invasive to your book, or is it less so?
In at least in my case, you have like a developmental editor, which is the one that they're like, they go to bat for your book. They're the one that read it. They go to their like finance department and say, hey, they show it around their office and like, can we give this author an advance? And so they are like that book's champion, and that's like their book, and they might have like 15 authors all together. And so they're going to work with you on like whether the story works, whether the characters are good, whether things make sense. They may not know even how to use a semicolon. It's not their job. They're not ever going to really correct your spelling on stuff. They're just going to be like, this doesn't make sense. Can this guy, what's his motivation? But then before it, like after you're all done it, then it goes to a copy editor who is like the fun police.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's
they're going to try to
the long dash? I'm guilty of using the
M
dash a lot. Yeah,
what?
that's it.
Oh, I use M dash. There's tons of them. Yeah.
Apparently that's a telltale sign that it's AI written.
But that there is or isn't an M dash?
Using an M dash in your
weird.
writing apparently is like a telltale ChatGPT sign.
Weird. The M dash is the double dash, and then it, at least on Word, it automatically connects them and makes them longer. Yeah.
Yeah. The old M dash.
It's beautiful.
What do you mean it's beautiful? Tell me about your M dash fantasy.
It just feels good.
I just like it. It's a good, like instead of like brackets is a bit more like, I find brackets conspiratorial as far as if you're trying to relay information in the middle of a sentence, they have a conspiratorial air to them. Whereas the M dash, if you are conveying information in the middle of a sentence, is just like functional. You know,
I love it.
I have ADHD. I put brackets after every sentence just because it's a thing from my head that I'm relaying.
Like you say, I invited my friend like Rogan, who once fucked a bear. You know, do you want that like to the party? So do you want that in brackets, like who once fucked a bear, or do you want it in M dashes? Like it's every author's own choice, you know?
Isn't it a comma? I just comma everywhere. I do commas everywhere.
No, because it's totally separate from the sentence
Run-on
itself.
sentence of commas nonstop. That's how my brain works.
Yeah.
An M dash, that's how you know that somebody's professional, because they use an M dash. Is that what our listeners are learning right now?
I guess.
No, he said that M dashes, it means it's written by AI.
Apparently it's a telltale trait. Because they're so cool. And AI is like, well, I want to be cool too.
I'm
going to start using that. That's really good.
But yeah, the copy editor is going to, I may have told you guys this before, but like when I use the word burned, like BURNED, and I also use the word burnt. And the copy editor, because if you're Canadian, they'll let you use like Canadian grammar. Right. As opposed to American or British, and they just kind of keep it for both countries. And so the copy editor was like, oh, it's got to be one or the other, like burnt or burned. And I was like, no, they're different words. They mean two different things. And he was like, you're going to have to explain why you think that, because it's not true. And I'm like, well, if your house burnt to the ground, you know, your toast is burnt. Your toast isn't burned, you know. But if you say like a passion burned inside you, like a burn, it burned. But you wouldn't say a passion burnt inside you. It would be a ridiculous thing to say. Like it would be so stupid to say my passion burnt. Like, is your passion a black and charred thing? No. Like I said to him, like burnt implies that something has been destroyed by fire, and burned is it is currently burning. Yeah. And he was like, okay, you can use it.
Yeah. Good argument.
Right? Because otherwise, if one person's just going with one of them, they're doing a disservice to themselves and the reader, I think.
Just wasting a word.
Why is he arguing with a writer? Come on.
But I mean, at the same time, I read a book recently where the person used the word, it was an American book that they used the word gray, Grey. And I was like, good for you, man. Like, you got to stand up to those fucking people that try to make it an A. And he's like, they did make me change it in the
really? Oh,
yeah,
that's funny.
Which I hate. Like, I think there is some big American authors that insist on the E, because they're like, it has a feel to it, as opposed to writing with gray with an A is just a paint, you know?
Yes.
Fair. Yeah.
I would think of it as a name. Somebody's name is Gray. Yeah.
So I wish more Americans would stick up to it. One, though, that they really do stick to their guns, so much so that I couldn't get it through, and I almost don't want to write it because I don't want to use their version of it, is the word all right. So if someone says all right, like ALRIGHT, they will not let you use it. They will die before they let you use it. It has to be all space. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
which just looks wrong.
Which is wrong when you're trying to say, all right, let's do this, you know, or is everyone all right?
I think my Apple product tries to autocorrect me to that all the time. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't want to use the word all right. Like that there's almost no situation where that sounds good, or looks good rather, on the page.
Right.
All one word. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God. So while you're writing, are you thinking to yourself, are you putting little asterisks at the bottom of your page going, prepare for argument?
Sometimes I've lost a few arguments. I've won a few arguments, but yeah, I think I took one to a Twitter poll once and I lost bad against
really?
Yeah. And I second guessed my editor.
Turned against you.
Yeah. I had used the word smirk and in place of like grin. And my editor was like, no, smirk has a negative connotation. It's always negative. And I'm like, no, it's just smirk, like whatever. And so I took it to a Twitter poll and I lost it bad.
Wow.
It was like 70-30 or something that said.
I kind of agree with your community. A smirk would imply deviousness to this extent.
Totally.
Other than writing, what else do you do? What are you up to?
I, believe it or not, I go to the gym 3 days a week. Wow, I probably hold the record for the person that's consumed the most protein powder without ever being ripped.
Nice.
Yeah. But given my generally sedentary lifestyle, And the fact that I'm dating someone 11 years younger than me, you got to keep it tight. You got to keep it together.
Good call.
Yeah.
You never know when you're going to be back in the game. Yeah.
Hopefully never. But I play a lot of video games. I love video games even more than I love books. I just love them. I'm never not playing one. I have a PlayStation 5 and then my PC, which I use kind of for strategy and like slow games. And then the PS5 is more for like RPGs and action stuff.
If you got a Mac, you could play faster games than your slow games on a PC.
Interesting.
After our last meeting, instead of being inspired to pick up your book, which I'm going to do eventually, you inspired me to pick up Cyberpunk finally.
Ooh, excellent!
And I'm loving it. I'm almost near the end, I think.
Okay,
I'm almost near the end.
You love Cyberpunk, don't you, Nick?
I do. It's my favorite game of all time, for sure.
Right?
Yeah. Did you get the expansion for it?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Which is pretty seamlessly integrated, which I was interested in, because I was kind of I'm like when I game in that way, I'm like concerned about, I want to play the expansion missions after everything as if I were playing it chronologically of when they were released. But then this expansion is very much integrated into the game. So it's been cool. It's been great.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you're liking it. Yeah, I love it. Love that game.
Yeah. It is funny, like for years, everybody's like, "Oh, this game's so janky," and then like the reviews now are like, they fixed everything. It's not janky. It's really polished. And then you get in, you boot it up, and it's still it's like it's not a perfect game gameplay wise. Like it's a little janky, but it's fine. Like it's great. Like
I feel like the trailers oversold it 2 years before it came out.
Yeah, they did.
10 years?
It was
right.
Definitely
No Man's
the most
Sky
hyped
styles
game of all time. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And both games have redeemed themselves. No Man's Sky also redeemed itself.
Very true.
Yeah. Not quite like Cyberpunk. I mean, they're probably both like Cyberpunk. Actually, people love No Man's Sky, who wanted, but yeah, Cyberpunk is like as good as you're going to get now, I think.
Really? Yeah, it's great. Yeah. The one funny thing I have playing it is that I remember a big sticking point with fans were like, you promised us multiplayer. And as I play, I'm sort of like, I don't really get how multiplayer would have worked at all. Like, it doesn't really feel like a game that you would want to have that sort of system in place.
They would have done it like Last of Us and just made it like a whole other kind of game with the same.
Yeah, or I think Grand Theft Auto maybe does that. But I feel like there was a time in the late teens there where all companies thought that everyone wanted multiplayer, and then they found out later in the late teens that people didn't want multiplayer as much, which is like very like, please don't put multiplayer in my single player games. Like, remember like Dragon Age had it, Mass Effect had it near the end. I was like, just F this.
No, when you want to make a AAA game, when I think about like great games that do not require multi, I think about Horizon. I think Horizon, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima. Yeah, like all those games are phenomenally amazing and brutal, and awesome, beautiful.
Yeah,
and it's solely because it's not dependent on having to connect to somebody else's system to work. Yeah,
it's hard to get like a really epic and like a good narrative when there's like someone called like Poopy Pants standing next to you. Poopy Pants 69, when they're like jumping up and down.
Emotes. Yeah. But it's a whole other demographic of people, though, that are probably playing it. Right? Yeah. I don't think you go naturally between Fortnite and Ghost of Tsushima,
No, it's true. That's true.
No. So that's your go to the island. If you could only play one game for the rest of your life, Cyberpunk.
It'd be Cyberpunk. Yeah, Cyberpunk. I just love it. I love the setting. Like I could sit on a rooftop in that game and just stare, and I often do, just stare at the city all the time and just like look at it and just listen to the rain and listen to the sounds, the sirens. I get the same feeling of being there as I did when I moved from a small town to a city for the first time. Spoiler alert, the city was Ottawa, and it turns out it wasn't so big after all. But still, like, it's just like, you get a feeling that there's life going on around you. And even like, I'm one of the most I'm a very secular person, I would say. I don't really like go for like mystic stuff a lot, but in the cyberpunk setting, they can feed it to me all day long and I'll gobble it up. Like my favorite place in that game is, I don't know if you remember, Misty's shop. Right. Where she'll read your tarot cards, and I will just listen to her talk about the tarot cards, and that shop is my favorite place in the game. And any sort of like mysticism, if it's in that world and like embodied in cyberpunk, I will just
Do I
inhale
do it? Okay, so I needed a new game to start because these guys have heard me ad nauseum talk about the fact that everybody at my work bugged me to play Elden Ring, and I thought it was trash. Oh my God, that game was the worst $90 I ever spent. That I played it for like 2 hours and threw it out. Anyways,
I can see that.
Perfect. Okay.
I liked it. I liked it, but I can 100% see why someone wouldn't like it. 100%.
Cool. Great.
Yes.
Thank you. So that didn't happen. And I booted up Watch Dogs Legion. I just booted that up and started playing it, and it glitched out hard. And I looked it up and realized that there's a massive bug in the game that they haven't fixed in 5 years.
Yeah.
And if you get it, you're kind of hooped on it. Delete as of last night. So maybe this is kind of serendipitous is the term. Maybe Cyberpunk is the game that I boot up tomorrow.
I mean, it's phenomenal. And if you need one last thing to put you over the edge, I would say that it is by far Keanu Reeves' greatest performance. That nothing even remotely can come close or even can be compared to it, because it's just more. It's like all of his movies combined plus times 20, because he just talks more in this game than he would in any movie. And so it's just like, and you're getting his best character. I think he's so full of like hubris and pathos and regret and anger and sadness. It's just like, he's just his best acting, his best character he's ever done, I think.
I didn't realize he was such a pivotal part in that game. I knew he was small, but
and they just added he's in it all the time. Like after a certain point, maybe about 5 hours in, he's nonstop in it. And they just added a patch, maybe like last week, where even when you're driving in a car, he'll be beside you in the car.
Oh, that's new. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're in, dude.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple scenes where he's in it automatically, like because of the narrative. But now he'll just be there. And even sometimes, like when you come out of a shop, he'll just be leaning against a wall. I don't want to like spoil the story for you, but he's not like a regular person. So you'll see an apparition of him just like sitting there smoking a cigarette, and it's just, and then you'll turn and come back, and he'll be gone.
Yeah,
like, it's just very cool.
Cool.
Him being in like there'll be like dialogue on the screen, and he'll be in like the background of the scene. That's cool.
Yeah.
Like, totally cool.
Yeah. So you'll get more Keanu Reeves than you've ever gotten from any other thing. And he's just great in it.
I want so much Keanu Reeves.
You'll get all the Keanu Reeves you want. Yeah.
He's better than when he was in the movie Parenthood.
Even better. Better than Bram Stoker's Dracula, Keanu Reeves.
Whoa. Yeah. Top tier.
Yeah.
Top tier. To circle it back, lastly, to do with games, have you considered writing and world building for video games?
Yeah, I did it briefly right before the pandemic. I helped world build a game. And this time last year, a company came to us and like pitched a Kings of the Wyld game. And they had like art for it and everything. It looks amazing, but they never ended up doing anything with it. So,
damn.
Yeah, I would love to see it happen, but
probably start Jack Black as a main character voice. Probably
that would be great. Yeah,
would that be good?
Back in the day when they were like, if you could pick anyone for your audiobook, which you can't, they were like, who would be the ideal person? I thought, Jack Black would be the best audiobook reader for this book. You know,
you're not allowed to choose.
No,
I think you could just hire him and just do it, right?
I mean, you could if you were like very wealthy and publishing your own book. Yeah. But for me, at least with my first book, they said, "Is this guy okay?" And I didn't have much choice. He was good. He was the guy who actually does the Jack Reacher books, and people love him. And then with my second book, I obviously by then I had a little bit more clout because it had done well. And I was like, the second book, the main character in the first book is like a 50-year-old, late 40s guy, and the main character of the second book is a 17-year-old girl. And I was like, I love that guy, but please, please, please don't let him do the second book because it would just be ridiculous.
David Tennant.
Right? So they gave me a choice between two women and I got to pick which one that time around. So I picked the better one. Perfect. Not the better one, but the more perfect one for that role.
Yeah, you got it.
That's like a rabbit hole conversation because like I'm actually not into the idea of an audiobook. I've never gotten into it because like my internal voice is my internal voice. And like, do they do voices? Like,
Some of them, yeah. I would say like have you heard of Joe Abercrombie?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, Joe Abercrombie, it was just funny because Joe Abercrombie, there's so many people who haven't heard of him, and even some fantasy readers who haven't read him. And like, if someone said Joe Abercrombie's the greatest fantasy writer ever, I'd be like, not to me, but yes, that's an arguable point for sure.
Right. Okay.
And when my mom, before I got published, she's like, "Oh, you're going to be famous." I was like, "Mom, do you know who Joe Abercrombie is?" She's like, "No." I'm like, "He is as famous as a fantasy writer can possibly be without being George R. R. Martin. As famous as you could possibly. He's this fucking stratosphere of fame." Right. And you've never heard of him. So no, I'm not going to be famous, Mom.
Wow.
So Joe Abercrombie is the fucking best. And his narrator, like I had read all his books, and then recently I listened to one of them, and I'd heard his narrator was great. And if possible, will try to always listen to his books from here on out, because his narrator is phenomenal, and he does voices for every character, just amazing, that just embody every character, and you couldn't even imagine without it. And there's another series called Red Rising by an author named Pierce Brown, who's also really huge. He's also the best looking male fantasy author to ever exist. And I think he's probably telling what is to me like the greatest story currently being told by a human being. His Red Rising series is that good. But I've only ever listened to them. And if I saw a friend reading them, I would slap it out of their hand and be like, "You get this audiobook and you listen, God damn it." Because the guy who does the performance is just like, it's so good and brings so much weight and drama to it. And
okay, number one, Pierce Brown. Yes, he's a very good-looking guy.
Yeah.
I'll give you that, 100%. But I also think that it's sorry, Danny. I think that it's also I wanted to use my first word. I wanted to use as a privilege, but like listening to books means that you're doing other stuff. You're not just sitting on the bed listening to a book. I imagine you're doing other stuff. You could be driving your car. You could be working. You could be a carpenter. You could be doing like lots of things. You're doing things, but people who sit and read books don't have anything else going on in their life. There's two very different people that consume that content. It's not like it's the same type of people.
Well, and you can also, what's that? You're sorry?
I don't believe you.
You don't believe that?
No.
What do you mean? If you're going to sit in a lounge chair and read a book, it means that you're not building, you're not doing your accounting job.
I think where it crosses over for me and for a lot of people is that like sometimes I got to do the dishes and I can't read. So while I'm doing the dishes, audiobook. I got to go for a walk. I do audiobook. I'm doing the laundry. I'm cleaning the house. Audiobook. Even at the gym or something like that. For a run, it might be a little bit like not, energetic enough, but yeah.
You read faster.
It's so much like when I walk around my neighborhood now, I remember very distinctly, like whenever I walk to this coffee shop, I'm like, oh yeah, I always think of this Joe Abercrombie book that I listened to while I was there. Or these amazing parts that happened while I was there. And the Red Rising audiobook series is not like a flawless experience, because when the second trilogy came out, they tried a full cast, and between the first and second book switched some of the actors, and then for the third book just went right back to the first guy who always played the main character. But still, I would always recommend audiobooking the Red Rising series.
Interesting.
At the same time, there's a huge debate because people audiobooks are kind of read a little bit slower. And so a lot of people will speed it up, and I'll put it on, I think I put it on 1.2 speed, just so it's a little bit faster. And some of these people are out here listening to it on like 2. Wow. And at that point, don't listen to it, because you're just screwing it up for yourself. And granted, it does depend on the author. Some authors are very famous for like taking flowery writing out of their books. Brandon Sanderson, for instance, he's just writing stuff. He's just writing what happened. And so if you want to listen to a Brandon Sanderson book on double times, go right ahead. But like authors that are trying to be like really, really poetic, like my favorite author, Guy Gabriel Kay, will constantly put a sentence or a word even in its own paragraph. And when someone's reading it, they'll like take a breath, say the thing, take a breath, start the next paragraph. And if you're listening to it on 2 times, forget it.
You lose it.
You lose a lot.
That says a lot about the producer on that set, or on that the session, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's where maybe the value to me, like the value proposition for me to books, is the detail. So if you listen to it at 2 times or whatnot, you might not suck in those details as much. And I guess that's my worry with audiobooks, is that I would zone out or just kind of get the general gist of things, but not really suck it all in.
Can I argue on that when you play a video game, I have a tendency of trying to do all the main missions first, and I lose the nuance of the game. And so I really, really want to like do the side missions. I want to do all the farming. I actually want to take in the game the way that maybe the director or the writer intended me to do it, as opposed to speed running it. Mm-hmm. So maybe listening to a book at double speed is kind of speed running the book and losing the nuance.
In the book,
I think so. I mean, there's obviously a limit, and some people say when you're listening to it that fast, you do still get the beats, like your mind will put them there. But I'm gonna disagree on that one.
Wow.
Just only once it surpasses what a normal conversation might sound like, then I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice. And this is only my opinion. People read books, consume books how you want to consume books. But yeah, it's my opinion that like, yeah, if someone's just like, blah, 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 you know, if it doesn't have the same cadence as a movie that you were watching would, then you're not really, you know, experiencing it the way it probably should be experienced.
Right.
The fact that they even give you the option to do it at like whatever extra speeds.
Yeah, I know they should. So if an author had a lot of clout, they could be like, no, like tell Audible, no, you can't listen to it more than 1.5.
That's fine.
Or 0.8. You have to listen to it slower.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it really sinks in.
You're going to take in my book the way I want you to take it.
Yeah. I mean, when I listen to my favorite author read publicly, he reads his stuff really, really, really slow. And sometimes I've read the book already, but then he'll read it super slow, and I'll be like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" Like, I do get more nuance when he reads it slow.
Well, that's how he wrote it. He wrote it slow in his head.
Yeah.
So maybe you got to decipher the author and before you read a book, and get in their head, right?
Yeah. But yeah, there's some great audiobooks out there. I recently read one called Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is a pretty famous, it's like lit RPG, which is like books that are kind of set up, the rules within the book are like a video game. And that one is probably one of the bigger examples of it. It was self-published. It's now traditionally published, and Seth MacFarlane picked it up to do hopefully a TV show or a movie about it. Wow. And its audiobook is immaculately done. Like lit RPG isn't really my thing, but the main character's voice, whenever like he gets achievements, like you would in a video game, and it's a whole separate like robotic voice for achievements. He has a cat named Princess Donut with him who might be a sole separate person for the voice. I don't know. But it is like a whole different experience. And I would never recommend that book on paper.
Wow.
Compared to the audiobook.
Is it okay? Absolute full disclosure. Mm-hmm. I've never listened to a radio or a book.
Yeah.
Audiobook. Never, ever. I just have seen David Tennant talk about it all the time. So he's my go-to guy. But is it like the 50s and 60s, like radio now? It's like where they got the honk and they actually like there's different voices and there
are some of them with bigger books. I know there's some Star Wars books out there that have the full sound effects in them. And like I said, with the Pierce Brown books in his second series, it goes from first person perspective to like multiple POVs. And so that's why they went with different voice actors for the first couple books. So you're like into that person's head, in that person's voice rather.
It's a radio show essentially at that point.
But there's no sound effects, but there are books out there that do sound effects. And at the end of Dungeon Crawler Carl, there was an ad for a sound effect version of it. And Kings of the Wyld, actually, my book has after about 2 years after it was out, they released a thing called a book track version, which adds like music and really muted sound effects. Like if they're in a tavern, you'll hear like tavern music and like pub chatter in the background.
Great.
I've never heard it.
Dude.
But I hear it's great.
Danny.
There's Walla.
Walla, 100%.
That's the term for the random chatter in the background. We found out that.
There you go. That's a great word.
I think.
Great word.
It's 100%. Yeah. That's loop. Oh my God.
So yeah, they're a deep dive. If you guys ever do get into them and you need recommendations, feel free to hit me up. Like, yeah.
Anybody listening to this, apparently they can contact you. Hey, Nick, I haven't read your book, but I hear you could give good references.
Totally.
Whose other books should I listen to?
Yeah, absolutely. Pierce Brown.
Okay.
First and foremost.
I've written that down. It's on my list.
Who would you say would recommend your books?
I mean, I feel like a lot of my books get grouped in with certain people all the time because they're adjacent to things. So if somebody has like run out of Joe Abercrombie books to read, people often will suggest me, because he also he doesn't really try to be funny as much as I try to be funny, but he can't help it. Like his voice is funny no matter what he's talking about. It can be someone getting beheaded, and there's just like a dark, cynical sense of humor infused into the writing. And the same goes for this guy named Scott Lynch, who wrote a book called The Lies of Locke Lamora. And yeah, but then also if you're a runner of like Terry Pratchett books and you're looking for something that's kind of also funny, it's not going to be as remotely as clever as that, but people, can jump over to Kings of the Wyld. So,
right. A wise person once said, "Let me be your number 2." Oh, someone said that once to me, and I was like, that resonates. Let me be your number 2. When you run out of number 1, come on over.
Exactly.
I got you.
Perfect.
But then there's also BuzzFeed, and then Orbit, of course, put it on the cover of the book. Once said like George R. Martin meets Terry Pratchett about my book, and when people like who love George R. Martin and love Terry Pratchett take great offense to that, obviously, like because they're like it's not as good epic fantasy as George R. Martin. It's not as brilliantly clever as Terry Pratchett. So, but if they had a baby,
you'll take it.
Yeah.
My wife is an avid reader because she's also a librarian. I don't know if those go hand in hand. I don't think they do. But I can't really think of any time where she started a book and then like stopped it halfway through. She's like, I don't like this. She always finishes books and then says, I hated that book. But we have watched so many movies where in the first 15 minutes we're like trash, shut it off, and we're done.
Yeah.
But I think readers, correct me if I'm wrong, readers, good or bad, or at least up for the adventure of finishing it and then coming to their own conclusion.
That's not true. No,
Good.
yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to hear.
Have you heard the term DNFing? So DNF is did not finish.
Of course.
And so do DNF, people DNF books nonstop now. And I do feel that is a more recent thing, perhaps coinciding with our shorter attention spans and how much there is out there to do. And I used to always finish books no matter what. And then, shortly after I became published and I had a lot more books to read, was trying to read a bit broader. I just don't got time for it. If if I'm not enjoying it, I'm out.
Wow. And then you'll never know if the butler did it. Yeah.
I was once 4 books into a series and a dragon appeared and the author used the word vast 5 times over the course of 3 pages to describe this thing. And I put the book down, closed it, have never read that author again.
I don't know if you know this.
Yeah.
You can just go to the last page and find out the answers.
Right. Yeah. I just couldn't take
skip to the end.
Yeah. The use of the word vast over and over again. I was like, if you don't care about this, then I won't.
That sounds like an editor problem.
Yeah, I know. It's both. Now
that you know in the background, you're like, oh, what a horrible editor. I don't blame the author for this one.
Well, I did tell my editor, I'm like, I am a real stickler for like double words, obviously like there and some words you can get away with lots, but my favorite word in the world is inexorable. And I used it, I think maybe in chapter 3 of my book, and I wanted to use it again, but I'm like, you can't whip out inexorable twice, within 100 pages of each other. So every time I would want to use it, I would measure it against when I had previously used it. And if it didn't match up, so inexorable is in my book twice, and it's right at the beginning, right at the end. And,
inconceivable.
Yeah.
I don't know that word. Inexorable.
Inexorable. It means basically like almost like unstoppable and inevitable.
Okay.
Like I think I use it to describe the sun's inexorable trek across the sky.
Wow.
Impossible to stop or prevent.
Yeah. It's a good word.
Actually, that is pretty good.
Yeah.
I play a game where at the shop where we give each other words to use and we have to pepper it into conversations and then we high five each other after the customer leaves.
Nice.
This is a good idea. This is tomorrow's word. Good job.
Perfect.
I'll use this 100%.
Well,
should we wind down a bit here, Bubs?
Yeah, we're at time. Which means we're just going to have you back on because
sounds like a plan.
Clearly, we are addicted to talking to each other. On top of the other things we've learned that we're similar on, your love for synthwave music is like hilariously on point with us as well.
Yeah. I love it so much that inspired me to write a comic that's like all synthwave inspired, and hopefully that's going to come out within the next couple of years.
Really?
We didn't even talk about our meet cute where we all met one another over the waffle machine in Penticton.
Yeah. So your first impression of us that morning, for those who don't know, we were doing Comic-Con in Penticton, Danny and I in particular, and we went down for breakfast from the hotel, and we were loud and obnoxious as we normally are. And Danny, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't know how to work the waffle machine.
I was struggling a little bit. It was kind of confusing.
You probably would have got there, but
yeah,
it's
not.
not.
Some know-it-all showed up. What did you say? I learned how to use this a week ago.
Yeah. A week before that, I was in an absolutely awful hotel in New Jersey and also struggled with the waffle machine. And some saint came out of nowhere and showed me how to do it. The waffle saint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We walked away going, like, still being jackasses. We're like, oh, that guy was really cool. Okay, great. Nice. But you resonate with us. And then sure enough, we show up at the Comic-Con and you're introduced on stage. We're like, oh my God, that's the guy we met at the waffle machine. Full circle. It's totally that situation where, like, you mouth off to somebody and then they're the person that's interviewing you for the job a week later, right?
It was fated to happen.
That's the inevitability. Jesus. Are we missing anything in particular? What are you doing these days that are exciting that you want people to know about?
Well, besides working slowly but surely on a third book, I've got a couple of comic things in the pipeline. One of them is my own, which will be a bit slower coming out. And then one of them is a collaboration with someone that I can't talk about yet, but it is so awesome. And so people can follow me on like Blue Sky or Instagram or it's pretty much it. And yeah, I will one day get to announce it and it will be amazing.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick. You're a lot of fun to chat with. You do a lot of cool stuff.
You guys as well. And if anyone out there, needs audiobook recommendations, regular book recommendations, hit me up. Video game recommendations. Yeah.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah. Nice. Always happy to spread the love. Yeah.
Thanks, dude. You're awesome. Okay, this is the part where we say goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
We're working 9 to 5 in a world so alive. 2 friends in the office talking jive. They love the pop culture, it was their obsession. So they teamed up, had a brand new mission. Started a podcast, just like a dream. Talking sitcoms, movies, and all things extreme. From Star Wars to the A-Team, they covered it all. Their conversation, random talkers that chat.